So you've seen all the usual attractions in London, and you crave something new, something out of the ordinary. Well, you're in luck, because today I'm checking out some of the most unusual tourist attractions in London. I've already made a video about unusual tourist attractions in London, but there's a lot more to see. I like common touristy things as much as the next guy, but sometimes you just want to experience something completely unexpected. That's why I looked up even more of the most unusual things you can do if you're in London. So let's get started. In the northeast of London, you can find a pretty strange museum. The Viktor Wynd Museum of Curiosities is the only museum of curiosities in England. It belongs to the Last Tuesday Society. It's a society that aims to become a non-profit organization, but until the paperwork is sorted out, it's run as a benevolent dictatorship by Chancellor Viktor Wynd. The Last Tuesday Society is dedicated to subverting life, the universe, and everything. They want to create a world filled with beauty, wonder, and imagination. And if it wasn't obvious already, they're most likely completely insane. It's still an absolutely amazing place to visit. I don't think I've ever seen a museum quite like this, and I probably never will. Oh, and make sure you book a spot at the Absinthe Parlor that's part of the museum as well. Should we try some Absinthe Royale? Why, yes, we should. Novelty Automation sounds like a really cool post-punk band, but it's actually an arcade filled with satirical game machines. This place was created by cartoonist and engineer Tim Hankin, who wanted to express his sadness over the commercialization of London. Novelty Automation would be an antidote to the corporatization of fun with its politically incorrect games. I have a personal interest in electronics and games as well as game machines, and I have been known to be a little bit sarcastic now and then, so this place sounds like a match made in heaven for me. If you happen to be close to the walkie-talkie, you can also check out a pretty strange little monument. The Philpot Lane Mice Sculpture is really tiny, and it's just two mice fighting over a piece of cheese. I find it absolutely adorable though, and there's a story behind the sculpture as well. When constructing this building, two workmen were fighting because one accused the other of stealing his lunch. They got into a fight while up at the scaffolding, and both of them plummeted to the ground and died. Their workmates later discovered that the lunch had been stolen by a pair of mice, so they created the sculpture in honor of their departed friends. That story is of course complete rubbish, but it does make for an interesting tale, doesn't it? King's Cross is a very famous train station in London, and don't worry, I'm not gonna talk about platform 9 3/4, because that's not a very unusual tourist attraction, is it? Sure, it is a bit charming to have a look at this iconic platform from Harry Potter, but it's really way too packed with curious tourists who want to get a silly picture with the trolley. Instead, let's head out of the King's Cross station to a very peculiar bookshop. bird on the water is, I believe, London's only book barge. You can find weird and wonderful books here, in a weird and wonderful location. I think that this is the only bookshop I've ever seen that's on a boat, and it's definitely one of the more unusual attractions of London, so I definitely think that you should check it out. The Shoreditch district in London used to be famous for its theatres back in the 1500s, but these days you can see a lot of other things here. Street art, for example. Banksy is a street artist that requires no introduction. His sarcastic street art can be found, well, almost everywhere these days. And in Shoreditch, you can see his designated graffiti area from 2003. Also called Guard Dog. The art is protected by plexiglass, and that's a good thing, because it's 20 years old by now, and still as impactful today as it was in 2003. And there's a lot of other amazing art here as well, so it's well worth a detour to see this place. Another place you might want to visit just north of Shoreditch is London's, or the world's, only purveyor of goods for monsters of every kind. It's the world's only monster supply store, and it's called, well, Monster Supplies. So no surprise there. This store dates back to 1818, and no one really knows why a monster supply store opened back then. Maybe there were more vampires and werewolves roaming the streets of London back in the 19th century. Either way, this is an amazing place to browse and see all the weird and wonderful, or maybe just weird things they have on display. I love this place, and I'm definitely coming back if I ever have some monsters I need to get supplies for. If you want to have a few drinks and a couple of laughs, there are plenty of places to go in London. There's a pub around every corner. But if you want to have a pretty strange experience, you can also visit Avora. Avora is an interactive experience filled with mystery and wonder and drinks. It's part performance and part social activity, and you also play a part in the story that unfolds before you. I'm not gonna spoil the experience for you, but if you wanna try something new and unusual, then you should give this a shot. I had a lot of fun, and let's just say that I might have been the one who ended up betraying our new friend's trust. I'm not gonna say anything more than that, but if you go to the show, then you'll see what I mean. Hyde Park is a lot. Hyde Park is a lovely part of London. Here you can get harassed by grey squirrels demanding food, or you can simply enjoy an oasis of calm in the middle of London. You can also find the Hyde Park Pet Cemetery here, a cemetery that came by accident. In 1881, a Maltese terrier called Cherry was buried here in a spot that he used to love. A tiny tombstone marked his grave, and it simply said, "Poor Cherry, died April 28, 1881. After that, a terrier called Prince, who belonged to the Duke of Cambridge, was also buried here. And after that, the floodgates opened. Hyde Park Pet Cemetery became the place for wealthy Londoners to bury their dearly departed pets. The cemetery closed in 1903, and by then there were already 300 graves here. This cemetery isn't open to the public, but you can pay £60 for a private visit. Personally, I'm not gonna spend 60 quid on that, so I'm happy just peering through the fence here. Is it just me, or doesn't that say City of Dork? Michael Jackson the musical, fun for kids of all ages. Leadenhall Market is absolutely beautiful, but maybe not all that unusual. It was the inspiration for Diagon Alley in Harry Potter though, so maybe a little bit unusual. Wingardium Leviosa, Wingardium Leviosa. This is rubbish, it's not working at all. This wizard afternoon tea has nothing to do with Harry Potter. It just happens to have wands and witches and wizards and stuff like that. This is basically what you get if you mix traditional British afternoon tea with magic and a bit of weirdness. Since it's just 11 AM, I think I'm just gonna have tea at this afternoon tea, but you also have a lot of other magical potions as well. And of course, I'm gonna eat a lot of delicious magical snacks. In general, afternoon tea is just partly about the food and the drinks. It's mostly about the experience. And a wizard afternoon tea is definitely a unique experience. So cheers to that. There's really an amazing amount of interactivity in this afternoon tea. I love it. Mixing potions and, well, doing all kinds of wizardy stuff. I've been to a couple of barcades, but I have to say that NQ64 is something quite extraordinary. They have a huge selection of games, both old and new. Everything from Time Crisis to 1942 to Guitar Hero. And most importantly, it's just as much a cool bar as it is a gaming place. It's big and loud and full of people, but from a gaming perspective, it might not be the best barcade ever. Bip Bip Bar in Copenhagen, for example, doesn't have quite as many games, but it's more cozy and inviting, and the music isn't as loud. And Q64 is still an amazing place, but it's more of a party spot, and not really for hardcore gamers. But that's just my geeky opinion. Either way, I still think that this is one of the more unusual bars in London, and definitely one you should check out if you're a geek. If you're in Camden, you can check out Babylon Park, an underground arcade and amusement park. This is fun, but strange. Very fun, but very strange as well. But overall, it's a great collection of games and fun for the whole family. Or just geeky grown-up men like myself. In my previous video about unusual things to do in London, I finished the video with a visit to the Brompton Cemetery, so I guess I'll finish this video with a visit to a cemetery as well. Highgate Cemetery is a beautiful but pretty strange place. There's lots of tombs inspired by Victorian and Egyptian designs. And you can find the grave of Karl Marx here, as well as the grave of the amazing sci-fi author Douglas Adams. I wish I had a pot of petunias to place at his grave. Or a towel, maybe. I wonder how many have stood by his grave and said, "So long and thanks for all the fish." Or possibly mostly harmless. Oh, and let's not forget that you can find the grave of Malcolm McLaren here, the founder of Sex Pistols. This cemetery is also famous for other reasons. There used to be lots of vampire hunters here, as well as dueling magicians. In the late 1960s, people reported strange ghostly sightings here, and more people reported seeing vampires in the cemetery. In 1968, 3 vampire hunters were caught vandalizing a dead body by driving an iron cross through its chest. In the coming years, more and more bodies were stolen and mutilated by modern-day vampire hunters, and in 1970, the remains of a charred and headless woman was found outside a tomb. It was suspected that this was the work of one of 2 magicians called Farrant and Manchester. These 2 black magicians were arguing over who would be the first to find and kill a vampire. Things got so heated that in 1970, an angry mob of vampire hunters broke into the cemetery. Farrant and Manchester decided to settle things in a civilized manner by having a magical duel in this cemetery, but that duel never happened. Things slowly calmed down after that, and these days we can just stare wide-eyed and shake our heads at the whole Highgate vampire incident. And that's about it for this look at more of the most unusual things to see and do in London. I hope you found it interesting. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. Now have a look at this video up here in the corner as well for even more strange tourist attractions.